It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in our Fanzine Friday series. Today is the 100th video for Fanzine Friday, and to celebrate that, we're going to kick off one of the most impressive fanzines that was ever created. This is the Beholder #1. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, from April of 1979, we're starting our look at a fanzine called The Beholder. Hope you enjoy the video. So today, as I mentioned, we're taking a look at a brand new fanzine. This is called The Beholder, and I think it's probably one of the most well-known fanzines out there. You may recall, if you've watched my series way back at the very beginning, I started by looking at the Dungeoneer. 1 through 6, those are done by Janelle Jaquays and friends, and I really think that those early issues of the Dungeoneer are, as far as I've seen anything so far, still the gold standard in terms of fanzines. But if that's the gold standard in terms of quality of fanzine, I think the Beholder probably sets the standard for the continuous production of quality, of putting it out month after month. You know, so many of these were maybe going to be monthly, ended up quarterly, were going to be quarterly, never really kept up the schedule. But the Beholder does a pretty good job for a couple of years of coming out just about every month, as far as I understand it. So the first few are not dated. I think it's the 4th or 5th one, which states that it's, I think, from July or August of 1979. So sort of I worked my way backwards to figure out that based on a monthly schedule, and based on the announcement that was in Demon's Blood about the fact that this fanzine was being put out, I think the Beholder probably, #1, comes out in April of 1979. It's really cool. I think, you know, obviously the Beholder image here is on the first covers. We'll take a look at that. Great artwork, right? I think that Beholder is just really fantastic. Reminds me of Tom Wam's Beholder from the Monster Manual, but maybe even a little cooler and crazier version of that. This fanzine is done principally by two guys, Guy Duke and Mike Stoner. John Stoner has a little bit, I think, of material in this one. But as it's been explained by Mike on some chat boards, Guy did the artwork and usually the competition dungeon, and Mike tended to do a lot of the other material articles that are in here. Not all of this stuff has a byline to it, but you'll see here at the bottom of this Beholder that the initials GRJD. That's Guy Duke. So just love this cover. Let's talk a little bit about the contents. You have the editorial, you know, introducing the new fanzine, etc. A new character class called the Trickster, new spells, or I'm sorry, not new spells, discussion of spells and how certain spells can be used or misused, with sort of like ideas of how to use them, and also some limits dungeon masters need to put on some of these spells and their creative uses. Viewpoint was just a discussion of a concept in the game. Monster summoning, which are their new monsters. Thoughts on treasure, which is a discussion about, you know, how much gold, silver, etc. you include, and how the interplay between coins, if you will, and experience points. Pyrus Complex, which is their adventure, and they call theirs competition dungeons. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. And then Magic Jar is their new magic items segment, right? Again, contributors principally Guy Duke, Michael Stoner. And I think Michael also handled, sort of like I said, like the business. So he took the subscriptions and I think arranged the printing and stuff like that. So the first thing I want to talk about is the various printings of this. In particular, if you're interested in collecting these, I'll explain how this worked. So Mike Stoner has said that the rarest thing out there would be an issue #1 first printing. Maybe only a couple hundred of those were made. Who knows how many of those still exist, right? Those would have a light blue cover, and they would be 40 pence, 40p would be the price down there at the bottom. And what they did is, from time to time, they would rerun these, right, to create back issues. And when they did that, the color cover would be whatever the printer had. Now he said all of the run would be the same color and would obviously have the same price. But it wasn't like they asked for anything. It was just whatever the guy had, you know, he would run. And what you notice is this price on here reflects what the going price, cover price of the most recent issue of the Beholder was. So when this was run, they'd raise the price of the Beholder from 40 pence to 45 pence, right? And this is the second printing, the first reprint, if you will. And then the third printing would say 50 pence. I don't have that. I've got a fourth printing here. It's yellow. And the third printing was sort of a pink color. Yes, I've seen one for sale online. So this one, and it says 55 pence down here, and it's yellow. And then I also have I guess it's a fifth printing, and this is 60 pence. Somebody stuck holes in here for some reason. So not all of the issues have multiple prints, but the early ones do, and you can tell sort of chronologically where they came, sort of what year they would have been run based on the cover price. For example, in the Dungeoneer and in Underworld Oracle, those reprints on the second or the cover, or maybe this inside page, they would indicate what print run it was. But in the Beholder, everything is the same about this except for the price that's going to be shown on there. Now, Mike did say that the very first print run, while it's light blue in color, is basically paper. It's not even really heavy stock like the later versions would be. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is my second printing, if you will. This is a third print run, a fourth print run, and the fifth print run. All the same. Only way you can tell the difference, right, is the, I'm getting out of the way, is the price. Okay. Inside, it's going to be all the same. Let's talk about this. Fantastic fanzine. With lots of stuff to talk about. This is there's 24, 25 issues of this that Guy and Mike are involved in, and then they sell it, and then a different group takes it over. They switched on issue 26 to basically full size, like magazine or module sized periodical, and I think they run through 29, so just a few, and then that's it. And then there also are some sort of special editions, which are compilations, I think, of monsters and spells and maybe something else. And I've got those, so when we get to the end, we'll talk about those at some point. Okay, let's dive in. So the editorial, Welcome to the Beholder, new zine, devoted to Dungeons & Dragons. And they introduce themselves, Mike Stoner and Guy Duke, who are the principals involved. So what are we trying to do here, right? That's usually what people tell you in issue 1. We intend to bring this zine out monthly. We're the only British, only fanzine that is doing this, other than some of the APAs. And they tell you we're going to be able to do it. We have all this extra material. We've already got stockpiled. And so if we're running short on material, we'll be able to fill out the fanzines and keep it on print schedule. They do ask for contributions. They don't have anything in particular, but they basically say, you give us a contribution, we use it, you'll get something, an extra issue, to your subscription or something like that. They are ready for subscription, so you can send to Mike Stoner and get your subscription. They're going to allow for contacts and for DMs that are running, postal campaigns to send in and get their name, address, contact information in here. And they announce that they have this competition dungeon. And they make specific mention of how a lot of zines have adventures, but they're not really set up as competitions. And how they describe that, we'll talk about when we get back there, to the things that they think sort of make that particular. Okay, the Trickster character class. And to me, it's pretty well done. It feels a lot like the sort of modern day vibe of the Bard, right? And so, as the name implies, this is someone sort of like a thief with some thieving skills. They can pickpockets, hear noise, open locks, and climb walls. They also get some spell abilities. One of their main things, though, is that they communicate, and in doing so, they have the ability to sort of have some special abilities vis-a-vis the opponent. We'll talk about those in just a second. Not particularly adept at combat. They get D6 on their hit dice. They can be humans, elves, half-elves, hobbits, and gnomes. Some of those demi-human races have some level limitations on there. 3 weapons to start out. So the main thing is, first off, in order to do this, they have to be able to speak languages. And so sort of incredibly, the Trickster class can learn all languages, which is I think, insane. But like in terms of like what a person could actually do, but it fits with the class, right? Because otherwise you couldn't use your abilities. First level, they speak all humanoid languages: Orcish, Goblin, Ogre, Kobold, etc. All the demi-human races, of course. Second level, all animal and insect languages. Then plants, water creatures, things that are close to humanoids like owlbears and were creatures. Then all other things that are close to animals like hellhounds or blink dogs. Then dragons, wyverns, and arcane monsters like the Mind Flayer. And then at 8th level, all other. Umber Hulks, Beholders, Rust Monster, anything you can think of. So at this point, anything that has any sentientness to it at all, including plants, they can communicate somehow. Which again is the base of the class, because let's talk about that now. So the main thing is their tricking ability, which is 30% at first level, and then plus an extra 5% every level after that. So an extra 5 at second, third, fourth, etc. And then they get plus 1% based on every point of charisma, and plus 5, just a flat plus 5 if the creature is the same alignment. Then negative modifier minus 4% for every hit die of the person or thing you're trying to trick. Okay, so that's your chance, and you would say, I'm going to try and do this. It's meant to be something that the player can be very freewheeling with what he or she says they try to do. They give some examples, but say these are just examples. The DM has to sort of flush this out, and also has to rein in so that this doesn't become sort of unbalanced in terms of power. So here's examples. 1, simple distraction. This enables the trickster to get a bonus of 20% on a pickpockets roll. Stalling technique basically gets the thing to pay attention to the trickster while the rest of the party runs away, sneaks around to flank the monster, sends somebody around to try and steal its treasure, whatever it is. Just basically keeping it focused on the trickster for some period of time, 1 round per level. Befriending. The creature will not attack the trickster unless obviously there's a sign of aggression like an attack, and you can add that befriendment to the other people in your party, but you have to roll a success for each other person after the trickster has befriended them. Confuse the opponent, just some jibber jabber, misdirection, chaotic behavior that lets him sort of bamboozle the character or creature, and everyone else will get 1 free attack. So it's just a sort of chaotic distraction to get the thing to look at him while the other party gets off their free attack. Or finally, the convincing, which is talk the creature into believing whatever you want. Probably not getting it to turn on its own allies or not do something that might harm it. It would get a saving throw for that, but otherwise pretty much, almost like a charm, right? So that's the core of the trickster. Like I said, it gets those thieving skills, limited thieving skills as a thief level, and then it gets some spell use. And so it starts off with a spell it can use once per day, like a magic user. And so ventriloquism, charm person, friends, audible glamour, ESP, clairaudience, clairvoyance, phantasmal force, charm monster, confusion up through 10th level. So they're adding 1 extra spell per day. And then from 11th through 20th level, they start getting a random 5th, 6th, 7th, and finally 1 8th level spell that they would just get to pick whatever they wanted. And they can use most magic items except for things that are restricted to being only to fighters or only to clerics. So that's basically the trickster character class. If you like the bard, especially as it's sort of portrayed, in my view, sort of in more recent editions as this sort of, happy-go-lucky jack of all trades who's constantly trying to charm everything, the trickster is probably actually closer to the character class you want to run than the AD&D first edition bard, which doesn't really have any of that, I charm everything we meet kind of thing going on. And they say it's a lot like a bard, but obviously you start at first level like everybody else. Okay, next we have an article called Spells, Use and Misuse. And these are, again, player suggestions and DM suggestions of how some spells can become much more powerful than you would expect, and also how the DM has to put some limitations on that. And I just, think, frankly, some of this is just like it's important to read the spells if you're going to be a magic user. So he talks about the reverse of enlarge, which is reduce, and how it has all kinds of uses in a game. Especially, I think, in the beginning, it wasn't limited to inanimate objects. And he says he does limit it in his campaign to inanimate objects. You can't walk up to a creature and shrink it. But you can shrink a door that's locked or a portcullis or whatever to obviously create an opening, which is a really creative use of that. You can reduce treasure if you have enough time to get it, to let you have more treasure in your bags to like get it out of the dungeon. You can take things like gold bars and that are tiny and enlarge them. It's the reverse of that. And then sell them because they look like they're bigger and you'll get paid more for it, right? And then you run away before the spell expires and they shrink. So just some different uses for that spell, all of which I think are great player creativity things, right? And I always like to reward players for sort of non-direct combat spell use in a creative way. Darkness is another one of his favorite low-level spells. He says all the cool things you can do. You know, a magic user who's in darkness, for example, can be casting and no one would be able to see him particularly. Now you can still hear him. He says he really likes for magic users to go into darkness and then cast invisibility on themselves, and then they can come out and do whatever they want. He likes to summon in monsters inside of darkness so that whoever you're fighting against doesn't know the monster's there, and then they get surprised when some creature comes out. So again, I think darkness has all kinds of great uses, and you also get into the whole debate about casting darkness, right, not on an opponent, but on an inanimate object, because I think typically maybe that does not get a save, but then that inanimate object might be something attached to or moving with an opponent. Some DMs don't allow that. They sort of say, like, can't cast it on the belt buckle or the boots or whatever in order to try and get around the saving throw. So that's a DM call for sure. And then the last thing that he says is, he really doesn't like Magic Missile. He says it's become, once you get to 4th, 5th, 6th level, it starts to become too powerful because it automatically hits. You get to fire off multiple missiles, and you can really start doing way too much damage. I mean, I understand his point, but I think it's a fairly limited spell. I've never really felt like people would rather use Magic Missile, say, than Fireball or Lightning Bolt, but he was not thrilled with that. Okay, viewpoint. And he talks about the fact that when you're in a campaign, all the stuff that is so fantastic, if it happened in real life, becomes very mundane, right? So he's like, you saw a giant beetle. In D&D, there's a giant beetle. Okay, we pull out our weapons. We're just gonna kill it. No particular excitement or anything like that. And so he says, if you remember when you first played this game, you didn't know how anything worked. You didn't know who any of these different type of monsters were, strengths, weaknesses, etc. The game was a lot more exciting. Once you know what everything is, its weaknesses, the game becomes a little bit more boring. And so he does encourage DMs to create new monsters, whether that's completely new or taking the common things that people see and figuring out a way to switch them up. Maybe that green slime is blue or yellow. You think it's yellow mold, right? For some weird reason. And all these other kind of creative things you can do to make things that you think are normal be somehow different. And you can't do that constantly, I think, or the players become frustrated. But you need to sort of keep things fresh and new and unexpected to keep your players excited and interested. And I think those are all really good ideas. And his last one is thinking about the monsters, if you will, shouldn't just always be, I see a monster, okay, roll initiative, we attack, right? There should be talking, negotiating, discussions, and also, of course, intelligence from the monsters that they do something other than just sit there waiting for the players to open the door and then just jump up and attack. I think those are all great suggestions. Okay, so here we have their new monsters section. They call it monster summoning. Great name. These monsters are okay. A selection of first level monsters. These are by John Stoner. I think it's called the Crois, Crois. Small. So this one I actually like. So these are small little 6-inch little balls of red fluff. Have arms and legs and little green eyes, and they're typically very scared. And their main thing is that they have developed this ability to vocalize and sound like other creatures, like a dragon's roar or any other kind of monster they've heard. They can sort of mimic that, including with volume. And so as is typically, if they're in an area, they're semi-intelligent, and so someone will be keeping a lookout, And if they see the party coming, they'll try to make noises to cause the party to run away. And they indicate that it's possible when you meet one, because they don't like combat, maybe you could even befriend one and get them to participate and come along in your party. It's okay. I think it sounds cute. The pig widgeon, related to orcs, 5 foot tall, pig-faced creatures. And they're just sort of a lot like orcs, in my view. They wear leather armor. They tend to fight with spears and bolas. That's like their big creative thing, is they use the bola, that will wrap around your legs and trip you, which is a great weapon. And as they point out in their ruling here, it always rolls armor class 10 with only either magic or dexterity adjustment, no adjustment for armor, because it's not trying to penetrate or damage you. It's just trying to wrap around your legs. So it's more likely to get a hit against a well-armored opponent. And if they hit, then your legs wrap up and you're going to trip and fall, and you got a few rounds to get out of there. All right. Next we have the GOP, G-O-P, and I think we have some art for that one. They're basically 5 foot long wasp-like creatures that buzz around in the dungeon. They don't attack per se, but they can harass you. They could like to get into your backpack or sack or anything they can get into. And their main thing is they hang out. They're sort of symbiotic with lycanthropes, and they like to eat wolfsbane, belladonna, garlic. And so that's their harassment. They'll sort of buzz you, harass you, and maybe if you're not paying attention, the DM will let them get in there and eat that stuff up. And of course, then the vampire or the lycanthrope, the were creatures, right, will come out, and you'll think you're about to have your defense, but no, the GOP has consumed it. Okay, next we have the Snarmer. And this is the Snarmer, a human-looking creature, except that it has snakes for arms. And those arms will bite you, no surprise, and they have a chance of having, sometimes there's a poison, 10% chance that the poison sort of comes in any successful attack. And so in addition to the poison attack, they also have the ability to cast essentially a snake charm that can change an inanimate object into a snake. Favorite things to do, the opponent's sword or other weapon, any 10-foot pole, whatever the characters might be carrying, a bow, if you had a long bow, short bow, turns into a snake and will attack not the Snarmer, but whatever is nearby, usually the person that was holding it. And if you defeat it, then when it reforms after a short period of time, if you've defeated the snake by attacking it, then your item is now broken. So that's kind of stinky. I think players will get pretty upset about that. But it's also, I think, the challenge of realizing, well, your bow or your sword just turned into a snake. Do you really want to attack it, or do you maybe just want to kick it away and kill the Snarmer? So anyway, challenging. Next, we have a thing called the Deep. And they're sort of like kobolds and troglodytes, a lizard-like humanoid. And this one has a pretty cool thing. It has clawed hands and feet, which, it'll try and claw you. And the cool thing about it is 1d4 damage, and it also has some type of a toxin in there. I mean, I'd give you a save probably against either spells or against poison. And it gives you the effect of a slow spell. And it halves, every time it halves your movement, your speed, your attacks. And so the first one, you're at half speed. The next one, you'd be at a quarter speed, an eighth, 16th, etc. And so it either you're slowed, or maybe you have the impression that everything around you is speeding up, depending on how the DM wants to play that out. But that's sort of the really cool, unique feature of the Deep, sort of a lizard man with this special poison claw. And then next we have the Dila. And the Dila basically looks like a dagger. These things are magical. They sort of fly around or move through water. And whenever they see you, they try to just fly straight into you and pierce you for damage. They have a bunch of little gems set in there. 2 of those gems will be its eyes. The other are actual little tiny gems that after you kill it, you can pry out and get yourself a little reward. And finally, the Malneurite, which is this ugly, bloated belly looking creature that'll come up to you and ask you for food and water. If you decline in any shape or fashion, it will then attack you to try and get to the food. It has these clawed nails, basically, is what it will use. They're not particularly strong. They have 1 to 4 hit points. And if you kill them, then you're cursed. Shame on you for not being nice, right, to the poor malnourished creature. Anything from an allergy, temporary loss of an ability at 1 point on your, your 6 abilities. You can have all your. This one I like. All of your liquid and all your liquid evaporates and all your food turns to dust. Next time you have a roll like open doors or something like that, it just automatically fails. Your hair falls out. You see illusions, sort of weird illusions, like you're on a weird trip from drugs. Your boots get super heavy, so it's hard for you to walk. All of your illumination, like your torches and your lanterns, will just randomly go out for a short period of time. You can trip and fall to the ground. All kinds of cool things like that. So anyway, all kinds of cool things there. And the curse, I think, are really clever ideas. I wouldn't want to make anything too permanent. Some of the stuff they have down suggests to be permanent, but some temporary stuff, I think temporary effects are always kind of fun. Okay. Now Mike's got some thoughts on treasure, and he's got a couple of ideas. I mean, in particular, he thinks there's way too much coinage coming up out of the dungeons because after 2 or 3 adventures, your guys probably now have so much gold amassed they can buy anything they want, right? And so he says, I'd rather cut the amount of gold you give out to a 1/10 or even 1/100th of what the treasure, is either in a module or what the chart in the back of the monster manual suggests in terms of treasure type. He said, but then I would multiply the amount of experience points they get. So they can get the same amount of experience points as you would normally give, but just give them less coins so it's longer for them. If they want to earn to buy something, it actually takes a lot more effort. And you'll see in fanzines off and on a discussion about the economy. Well, it's the inflationary pressure that's created by all this gold suddenly showing up in a town or a village. And again, also the idea of just like, what do you do with these just pounds and pounds of gold, right? The other thing he talks about is just remembering that any type of a humanoid that has magic items is going to use those things, right? Rings of protection, magical weapons, wands, staves, whatever it is. If they could understand how to use it, they're going to use it against the player. So don't forget to make sure that the treasures or the magic items are getting used, maybe even used up in the fight. And then this weird thing in here about why there are treasure chests so often down here with a lot of creatures that maybe don't have the manual dexterity to open locks or definitely install, these various traps that are in chests. So how do those chests get there, he says. And then that's a great question, and one you should probably think about. I mean, my view is it's probably been there for a really long, if it's in a room, say, with snakes, right? Then that chest has probably been there for a really long time before the snakes showed up. Who knows how it got there? But he's got this crazy idea that people in town come to the monsters and say, I want to give you my stuff in a treasure chest, and you'll guard it for me so that people in town won't rob me. Somehow I can trust you more than the people in my hometown. And I'll come down from time to time and I'll feed you for guarding this. And that's the other reason why monsters just sit in these rooms, because they don't need to go out and get fed because people in town are bringing them food. I've never heard that idea before in my life. It seems crazy. But it goes to that fundamental question, like, why are these creatures, especially in the funhouse dungeon days, right? Like, why are these creatures just hanging out down here? That doesn't make any sense. And that's a fair point. So I try to get away from those early days dungeon designs nowadays in my campaigns. But in any event, it's good. It's a good question. All right, now we have our competition dungeon called the Pyrus Complex. So first, he's got a little discussion here about competition dungeons. And he says, obviously, you can modify these to drop them into your home campaign if that's what you want to do. But what makes it a competition dungeon is, one, we've got some pre-generated characters that the players are going to use when they go through this, not their normal characters they had, rolled up and brought with them from prior adventures. And secondly, there's a scoring system. Now, of course, the competition dungeon, in my view, really makes sense when the idea is that different groups of players are going to go through it sort of simultaneously or over the course of a couple of days at a convention. and they're all getting scored, and then somebody's going to win, right? And so he does here. He has his characters, which oddly he says the DM should pick, or he calls it Game Master. 5 of these for 5 players. Now, obviously, if you ran at a convention, you had more than one DM, you'd have to get together and decide. So he's got Thog, the dwarven fighter, Beagle, Beagal, whatever it is, human fighter, Gilgloss, the magic user, elf, and the 4th level illusionist named Zogam, and Arlam Minel, the 3rd level cleric, Melorn, the 4th level druid, Lazarus Stoat, the 4th level thief, and Olog Haig, the 4th level barbarian. I'm not sure where he got the barbarian character class at this point in history. But so those are sort of his ideas around the what makes it a competition. And he's got, his ideas for scoring. And he uses every 100 gold points, 100 gold pieces gives you a point. Magical items give you 8 points. Dead characters, minus 25. Don't make it back out on time. You get every so many minutes you're late getting out. That's a problem. Killing certain of the major opponents, so like the chieftain of the hobgoblins. Collecting certain items. Just collecting them gives you points, and then some of those items you use in other parts of the dungeon, so collecting them and then using them, that's, again, more points for that. So figuring things out, getting through certain rooms in here, solving certain traps, tricks, puzzles, all those kind of things, you get more points. All right, so let's talk a little bit, though, about the Pyrus Complex. So the backstory here is that this adventurer, a famous adventurer called Pyrus, had discovered the secret entrance, and this is turned sideways, so north is to the right and here, and he's discovered the secret entrance at the far northern end of the map into these caverns. And so for whatever reason he liked it, he brought his brother, who was a sort of engineer, to help come and help dig out and create other things in here for them. But when they did that, his brother came upon some creature called the Horror of the Deeps, which ripped his brother to pieces. And he couldn't even be resurrected because there weren't enough pieces left. And then the brother, Pyrus, kills the creature, but then he goes into deep mourning. So he gives all of his minions and supporters and everybody out, and he stays in there. And then he's been forgotten till recently. This place has been rediscovered. Adventurers want to go in, but they've been repelled by a band of hobgoblins that seem to be guarding the entrance. Here come the characters. That's it. There's no real hook. It's just like, you're here, you're going to do this dungeon, it's a competition, so that's your backstory. In you go. It's pretty good. For a competition dungeon, it's got a few different really like 4 discrete areas. You've got this cavern area, and there's obviously some monsters you got to fight your way through, like the hobgoblins you know about, some other things in there, a couple little traps, tricks, things to figure out along the way. You got this little group off to one side of other creatures called mites. I think they're in the Fiend Folio, but I'm not 79. I don't know if that's right or not. Maybe they'd been in White Dwarf or something like that. Then you've got this sort of odd area over here where there's an underground forest and a temple. And then if you can get down here on what we're looking at, it's the bottom left, which is the southeast, if you turned it, is the labyrinth that he had constructed. And so that's the high-level overview. I like it. I think it would be a fun dungeon to run your characters through. Like he says, you could take, I kind of give you the characters that are pre-generated that you're going to use. If you could have a party of similar abilities, you might let them run through it. He says, now, of course, here, the magic items and things I give you in the sort of tournament or the competition dungeon are mostly done because you're going to need them and use them in this dungeon. I don't really take into consideration how those might play out if you had them and took them to the surface and used them in your home campaign. So that is one of the design features you think about differently here. And he said, of course, you got to think about that. If I've given something that's too powerful to be used outside of the dungeon, maybe you got to figure out how to get rid of it. So that's Pyrus Complex. The first of they say their plan is to always have these sort of more competition dungeons in here rather than something you'd use in your home campaign. Now finally we have the magic jar, which is what they call their new magic items section. There's some good stuff in here. Gauntlets of alignment, lawful, evil, neutral, good, whatever. And these gauntlets then would allow you to touch and use items that have alignment restrictions. So maybe you're chaotic good, but if you wear these things and they're evil aligned gauntlets, then you can use an item that's only usable by evil alignment characters. It's okay. Don't love that one. Monk love this. Now most people don't like monks in their home campaign. I'm a fan of monks. These have metal strips on them on the hands, so you do extra damage with your monk attacks. +1 made of mithril, or +2 made of adamantite, and so they let you hit things that can only be hit by magical weapons, and they do some extra damage. And then we have some ropes. So let's take a look at our art here. 3 different types of ropes. Rope of Tricks is basically an enchanted piece of rope that has the effect of the rope trick magic user spell. So you flick this thing up in the air, it'll catch in an extra dimensional space. You can climb up there and get into the extra dimensional space. The rope of Trickery is thrown into the air and it'll just stand there just like that, right? But instead of going into an extra dimensional space, when you get to the top, it turns you invisible. And then you act like you went into the space, but then you climb back down, now you're invisible. Same as the spell, right? Same, and it goes away if you attack and so forth. And then finally, Rope of Residing, which goes up and then is sort of permanent space up there, and you can stay up there forever. Now the problem with that one is 2 things. One, when you find it, something might be residing up in there, like a creature. And secondly, you can move the rope around, and anyone or anything that's up there is moving around with it. So you do that, you go up into that space. Someone comes along and sees the rope, takes it, puts it in their backpack. Next thing, it takes it, sticks it in the closet. When you try to come back down, you're going to come down that guy's closet. So, whoops, hold on, I'm not there yet. Next thing is the magical tinderbox. They said this idea is from a Hans Christian Andersen story. It's a regular tinderbox, but then it has a magical ability. If you strike it really hard, it'll summon a dog that will protect and be your companion, fight for you. If you strike it really hard twice, it'll get a 10-foot long dog, great big dog. And if you hit 3 times, you'll summon an even larger dog. And you can summon all 3 at once. If one of those dogs is ever killed, that particular dog will never come back again. And then they have the Cursed Tinderbox, which looks like a normal tinderbox, but when you strike it, there's a small chance every time you use it that you'll summon a Type 1 demon. So, and again, I like that because you're trying it, you're using it, you can have it for, weeks or months in your campaign before it finally goes off and that demon comes out. So that's kind of cool. And you probably wouldn't take that with you to get it identified, right? Unless you cast, I guess, Detect Magic and you knew there was some magic aura to it. All right, so the next thing are Eyes of Viewing. These are little, I don't know, they could call them cusps. So these little round things you stick up over your eyes. And when you look through them, they allow you to see anything that's out of phase or invisible. But only that. So you can't see any creatures that would be normally visible to you. So you got to kind of pick which thing you want to do, and you can't just walk around wearing them all the time. So I think that's pretty well balanced. Okay, so now here's my other drawing. This is the Sanctuary Scarab. So it's this big scarab, and it says it's got these gems, and you can hold it up. And if you do, anybody that sees it will basically, it'll be as if you have a sanctuary spell, and they basically will not be able to attack you. You can do all kinds of things. You can fight, you can cast spells, and as long as you don't attack someone who is held off or transfixed by the sanctuary effect, then that is not canceled. But if you do attack somebody who's not able to attack you, then they get another saving throw. All right. Next, we have spell swords. These are crazy, way too powerful. +1 to +4 swords that have the added ability of a spell effect imbued into them. And every time you hit somebody successfully with an attack, that spell is cast. So they say it can be Reduce, Shocking Grasp, or Sleep. That's +1. +2 swords would cast something like Rave, Enfeeblement, Scare, Slow, Confusion, or Fear. +3 swords, now it's really out of hand. Feeble Mind, Death, Disintegrate, Flesh to Stone. And +4 swords, Power Word Stun, Power Word Blind, Power Word Kill. The concept I like the spells are way too powerful. You'd have to you either have to make it randomly happen, I think, or tone those spells down so they didn't have nearly the same effect. Because you could do something, over and over again in a fight, right? And so that's just way too powerful. You guys know I like cursed items. So the next one is the cursed Warhammer. Looks like a normal Warhammer, works like a normal Warhammer, but these things are made by somebody who hates dwarves. And so if you ever throw this thing, if you're a dwarf, it will come back around and hit you for 3d6. I'm sorry. If you throw it, anyone throws it, it'll come back and hit you for 3d6. If you're a dwarf, it'll do 4d8 damage to you. So cursed effect affects anyone who throws it, but in particular, extra damage to dwarves. Okay. I love this thing. What do we got here? Looks like a potion, right? These are called slime potions. And so they say when you look within, you'll see something that's either green, ochre, or colorless. And it either has a green slime, an ochre jelly, or a gelatinous cube in it. You could obviously have gray uses and black puddings in there, the same thing. It's magically enchanted. They took this thing and put it in there under like extreme pressure. So if you open that, it'll just sort of almost explode as it comes out, and it comes out to normal full size, and almost inevitably comes out and hits whoever was the person who opened it. And even if it doesn't hit you initially, then if it's a creature that can move, it's going to move towards you and try to absorb you, dissolve you, whatever. Plus, slimes and oozes and stuff are just some of the best parts of the game. They're awesome. Okay, next, and I like this one a lot. It's called Boots of Floating. I don't know, might change it, or maybe it's feather feet or something like that, because the point is, whatever you run or walk on, you don't sink. Dirt, you don't leave, footprints. Walk across water, snow, again, no footprints, sand, lava, whatever it is, the boot isn't damaged, and you don't actually go down into it. You just sort of, like on a molecular level, you're just right above it. So I like them quite a bit. No extra speed, no extra skills, but the ability to cross anything and not leave a trace is pretty cool. And finally, we have Tensor's Disc. That's right, Tensor from Gary Gygax's home campaign. I think it's his son, maybe. And Tensor's Floating Disc, this has a permanency spell cast on it, and will have a platinum coin with a T for Tensor on it. And you pick up that coin, and as long as you have it in your hand or your pocket, you maintain control of this platinum-coated, this Tensor's Floating Disc that can carry your stuff for you. So that one I think is pretty cool. Okay, next we have the Gem of Beauty. And you hold this, somebody else has a similar item, you hold this gem up, and it's so exciting that any intelligent creature that sees it will want it. And they just can't, and they'll be compelled to take it off of you by force if necessary. But they have to stop anything else they're doing, and all they can think about, and all their actions will be driven towards getting that gem from you for themselves. My precious, right? Okay, next we have the Anti-Spell Shield. And so this is a shield a fighter would wear, presumptively. Could be a cleric or someone else. And it can absorb up to 30 levels of spells. So, a magic missile is first level, lightning bolt's 5th level, right? 3rd level. And you've got to be 5th level to cast it. And so you just got to keep track of how many levels of spells this thing's absorbed. When you get to 30, it will break. Does not explode, doesn't release all the spells at once. It just becomes useless. And no one, you wouldn't know that, right? You wouldn't know where you are in the count, etc. But it's, it's pretty good. And so it's not automatic. You have to roll 3d6 and be under your dexterity to get the shield over, to block and then absorb the spell. I like it quite a bit. It's a little bit powerful, but the right level is probably okay. My favorite magic item, I say sort of in jest, is the Helm of Communication. It sort of looks like a Campbell soup can to me, and then it looks like one of those really old diving helmets, right? But it's got like built-in walkie-talkie system, and so if anyone else has the same, has one of these helmets on, when you talk, then they can hear you, no matter what the distance is. Up to 100 miles, it says. If you're willing to wear that, I say give you the communication skill. Just kidding. It's a clever item. And then we've got the Demon Potion. Like the Slime Potion, this contains the essence of a demon, and if you open it up, the demon, if you say that the name will be written on there, and if you say the name, the demon might appear, and if you open it up, the demon definitely is coming out. They say you can try to destroy the essence of the demon that's in here by opening it and pouring holy water in really quickly. And you have to do a dex roll on a d20 to be faster than the demons with the water in, than the demon escapes. So anyway, pretty, like that. And obviously there's pretty good warning because the name should sound sort of demonic on there, right? And finally, there's a little item, little half-inch gem called a gem of heat or a gem of cold, and only usable by a druid. And it's magnetic, and you put it on something metal, like someone's shield or like their armor, and it will begin to heat up or cool down, depending on which type you have. And it's just like the spell, right? Every round it gets hotter. I mean, the person probably doesn't know where the heat or the cold's coming from if you're sort of sneaky with it. If they see it, they can rip it off, and then the gem will no longer work at all. But and also, if it gets to maximum heat or maximum cold, it will sort of shatter and just become useless. And so that's a cool item. I don't know, it requires an awful lot of skill for the druid to sneaky get that on there, but it's a good choice. Okay, last page here, just a little bit of information. They're giving you the prices for advertisement, their copyright, their subscription information, and now they say a competition. They mentioned that they would sometimes include or sort of a narrative of a play test for their competition. They didn't do that here, and so they asked the people who've read the fanzine to do that and write in their players' sort of narrative experience. They're going to pick the best one and they'll publish it in a future issue. Let's just take a little bit of a look here at the artwork. As I mentioned, all of this is by Guy Duke. He's got the wizard, lightning bolts, snakes, dragons. That might be the orc-like creature he talked about. And then we got the little bumblebee. Here's the full picture of the snake arm guy fighting this guy with a really funky-looking shield. This lizard creature looks like it's been killed, and then we got this little sturge-looking bird here as well. Okay, Fanzine Friday. The Beholder, number 1. Pick your favorite color. I think the Beholder is going to be great. As I mentioned, this will be over 3 months, I think, probably worth of Fridays that we'll be taking a look at the Beholder and the special extra issues from the Beholder. I appreciate all of you guys who enjoy Fanzine Friday with me. We have a small but dedicated community, I think, who really enjoys as much as I do looking at and talking about these old fanzines. They're little time capsules of all the great ideas that were percolating around out there in our hobby back in the late 70s and early to mid 80s, when most of these that I have were created. Thank you guys for coming on this journey with me. Like I said, we've been at this now for over 2 years, and not even halfway through my fanzine collection yet. So we've got a lot of fanzines to look at in the years ahead. Hope you guys have a great Friday, have a great weekend, and I hope you're subscribed to the channel. If you know some friends in the hobby who might enjoy this, please send them our way. We're working our way to try and get up to 1,000 subscribers. That's the goal. I don't know if we'll get there by the end of the year, but I think we're going to make great progress. Till next time, my friends, keep rolling 20s.